Las Vegas, a gambler's dream, and a dreamer's paradise. They're all about to meet their worst nightmare.
Look out, Vegas!
If we destroy the gold, we get rid of the Leprechaun once and for all.
Leprechaun 3, the third time's the charm.
Good evening.
He's back. Ready for romance.
She loves me. Our queue's only just begun.
Ready for murder.
You ball-busting bitch.
What, did you shoot him with steroids?
Leprechaun 4.
Hey everyone, welcome to Rotten Cinema. We talk about good movies, bad movies, good bad movies, movies that are just fun to watch. But as always, I'm not alone in talking about these movies. I have a very special guest today. He has made some of my favorite movies, amazing action films, but he does a variety of genres. Brian Trenchard-Smith, thank you so much for stopping by to talk to me. And we also have Andre, who's going to be my sidekick today.
Very pleased to be here. And the top of the morning to you.
So jumping right in, again, love the movies. It's funny because I was thinking about Leprechaun 3 in particular, which was something that was on cable, and it was one of those things where I would record every horror movie on VHS for the old, old people like myself before you could DVR something. So that movie was kind of on regular rotation for me. So even then I could kind of appreciate the nice balance of horror, comedy, very absurd. So I was wondering if you could talk about how you kind of got involved with that franchise.
Well, I had a relationship with the producers, Jeff Joffre and Walter Johnston from Night of the Demons 2. And so when they were asked to make the next in the Leprechaun series, and probably the last in the Leprechaun series, they'd done number 1, number 2. Number 2 hadn't quite performed at the box office as number 1 had. So they said, okay, we'll do a third one. We've got to have a trilogy. We'll put it straight out to home video. Make it, for $1 million. I think it was $1.2 million, or sort of maybe it went to $1.3 million, but the plan was to make it for $1.2 million, about maybe $300,000 or $400,000 less than Leprechaun 2. And that'll close out a nice little trilogy, which we'll keep recycling. So that was the assignment, basically. And they said, well, send the Leprechaun to Vegas. Obviously the capital of greed and broken dreams. Just, go for it. And we were given, pretty much, creative freedom. I pushed for more humor than had been in the first 2, that was, people, so okay, give it a shot, and humor expanded throughout the shoot. We had to shoot for basically 14 days in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles that has now been pulled down. And it was an old hotel, and it did very well for the interior of a seedy Vegas casino. And we did a few, in adjacent streets and car parks, we did a few other Vegas scenes. And then we did all the other Vegas scenes in one night of shooting on the 15th day. in Vegas with a guerrilla crew of 9, including Warwick Davis and Gabe Bartolos as the Leprechaun and his makeup genius who created the makeup. So I was invited in. I did a rewrite of the script myself with my writing partner, and who partnered with me again and wrote the screenplay for Leprechaun in Space, which followed number 3. And so that's how I was invited in. And it was, you got to do this in 14 days. So how do you make the best movie you can in 14 days? You maximize the production value of locations, and hopefully you've cast some interesting actors in the roles, and they bring an extra something to them. I was fortunate that Warwick was interested in doing more with the role than he'd been allowed to do on Leprechaun 2, which I think had been intended to be Bride of Leprechaun. But in fact, the British distributor didn't know what to do with it, because Leprechaun 1 had not exactly hit the mark in the UK. It was sort of a curious oddity. So Leprechaun 2 was not going to be, a sequel was not really going to be attractive. So they changed the title of Leprechaun 2 to 4 Funerals and a Wedding. They had just released 4 Weddings and a Funeral recently in England, so they thought some play on that title would attract an audience and maybe make them see that it was a bit of a laugh. But it wasn't enough of a laugh, and Warwick felt that he spent too much time lurking in the shadows. Which is a perfectly reasonable approach. Tried to make him scary, but I never found him scary. I found him splendidly absurd, and it really appealed to my sort of Monty Python-esque streak. So and it rears its head from time to time in various films of mine, if you can detect it. So I thought, well, let's go with it, and let's go with absurdist humor wherever we can. So give them the horror moments that they are expecting, but fill it full of laughs and gasps. So that was my plan, and I had a fantastic cast and crew that really helped me bring it off. I want to single out, Lynn D'Angona, my first assistant director, who did a tremendous job, really delivering the goods to the set, so I could shoot as many images in the day as I possibly could. I mean, we were working 12-hour days, and we occasionally did a little bit of overtime, not as much as I did on Demons, but and she was amazing, and she did a little bit part playing I needed a nurse who was not paying attention to the actors who were trying to get her attention, because she was taking a personal phone call, and so I couldn't find an extra who could do it. So I just said, "Lynn, can you do this?" And sure, she could. So she was a Jill of all trades, so to speak. So. And I like to use these opportunities to talk about my films, to actually single out the unsung heroes. Lynn, I was encouraged to hire a male assistant director, but I thought, no, let me hire, this very energetic and talented woman. And she then went on to be my second unit director on Leprechaun in Space, and on Megiddo, Omega Code 2, which, if you haven't seen it, there's a gap in your life.
You mentioned that Leprechaun 2 was retitled 4 Funerals and a Wedding. Were 3 and 4 given any titles, or maybe just like as a joke, but like an in-joke, maybe like Luck of the Irish or something for 3?
I would love an experienced movie nerd watching this broadcast to answer your question better than I. But I know that in France, they called it Space Platoon. So I would have to see the French dub to see whether they were really trying to reflect my sense of humor, which had certainly gone pretty much into high gear by Leprechaun in Space. Yeah, I'd like to know that. Wow, titles are so interesting. Completely random. You know, the original, the Japanese actually printed a poster for Dr. No, the very first James Bond movie, which they didn't know anything about, but they knew they had the distribution rights. So they mocked up a poster and they thought, what title are we going to, how will we translate Dr. No? And so they translated it in Japanese, "We have no need of a doctor." Interesting title for a James Bond movie.
That's
anyway.
awesome.
Yes.
So you were saying about how Warwick Davis wanted to like kind of expand the character. So I'm kind of wondering if like during the writing, what if any like input he had in some of his like character arc.
Well, he didn't have any in the writing. He arrived. He liked the script, but he got it pretty, not long before he took off. And then I said, we're going to expand on this. And what little bits can you bring to here and there? And particularly in Leprechaun in Space, he did that too. So I just looked for all sorts of opportunities for him. And so the whole idea of the Leprechaun as a character on TV in the mind of the sleazy casino owner, and the fembot coming out of the screen, etc. Well, all these people that the Leprechaun impersonates, we put in so that he could do different accents, different characters, different costumes. In Leprechaun 3, we scrubbed up and dressed as a nurse for the operating room, and just little bits like that give the audience a giggle. And then it's a giggle on his side, because we were always really rooting for him, whatever ghastly things he does to people. He's our sort of alter mayhem character. So anyway, we found lots of little things for him to do, and I came up with limericks for him. And for rhyming slang as well. As he swings the axe towards John Gaten's spread open legs. For playing me this tricks, I'm going to chop off you. Whack! The axe comes down between his legs, and making the sound of the word that he does not utter. And that's a good laugh. And we did that on the set. So I do a lot of little bit of improv on the set when I think the actor's got something interesting, or when I've got a bright idea.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, again, it's like, there's like a handful of movies you see just at the right time. And I feel like that was one of these movies for me, because again, I was like early teens. So like that sense of humor, it was just right in my kind of wheelhouse. Like everything kind of lined up. It was like silly, it was gory, it was a little racy. It had everything I kind of wanted from a movie. So,
well, I channeled my inner pubescent self. There's a part of me that possibly is eternally 13, thereabouts. It caters to all those things that 13-year-olds find fascinating, and the dick jokes, crotch jokes, boobs, and splatter moments. But I think it's, if you bring it off with a degree of humor and maybe even satire of the genre, then yeah, I think that's perfectly acceptable for young minds to feed on. I'm just, I had my attitude to horror has evolved as I've got older, as everyone does, I suppose. Their views always get a little bit more conservative as they get older. But the extremes of violence now that are available to 8-year-olds to see at random on television at the moment is, I think, a little disturbing and might be corrosive to the development of their innate sense of empathy. If these things just seem to be, every day, bang, splat, heads off, arms off, etc. I don't know. And it may sound quite hypocritical of me because I've, look at Turkey Shoot. But I was all for pushing the envelope when we were breaking free of censorship or wrestling against it in the late 60s and breaking free of it in the early 70s. But in a way, I wonder whether the obsession with how far can we go it may really have gone too far. But it's a point of view. I certainly think that no one wants to watch gratuitous nudity anymore. We all feel slightly ashamed of doing so. I don't think that's an attractive element in drama. And honestly, I feel quite. I'm bored when the obligatory steamy love scene takes place every episode of some nighttime soap opera. Do I need to see the disrobing and the caressing? And okay, fine. But what's the next story point? What's the next character point? I'd be more interested if, the lead actor, if that character suddenly became impotent in the middle of the scene. Now that would be a story point, and then there'd be a reason to see it. But I recognize this seems to contradict a certain amount of my philosophy in early filmmaking, where gratuitous nudity and a degree of violence was considered a strong selling point for certain genres of film. Make of that what you will.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a really interesting point. I know that it's so funny because I think, we are maybe a little bit jaded now with this maybe oversaturation of, violence, nudity. It definitely takes a lot, I think. I mean, just speaking for myself, it's been a while since I've really been shocked by something I've seen, like on a movie or TV show or something. So I don't know. I think I'm very jaded. Maybe I am a little bit like desensitized now.
Yeah. That's I mean, horror can. Well, I suppose you can get into even greater, details of dismemberment and unpleasantness. But I think true horror is in creeping dread, in suspense and real concern about what's going to happen to the character you have imprinted on for your journey through the movie, that's where the vicarious thrill and the catharsis comes really from that experiencing the journey with that character. And of course that character gets the chop. That's unfortunate, but it's some horror films with unhappy endings and no one survives do very well. But it's I think it's the quality of the drama that ultimately is important, rather than the extreme explicitness of the horror. I think obviously we're always looking for a new way to hit the audience with impact, and prosthetic makeup artists come up with new things all the time, and CGI CGI can throw eyeballs at you, and then the eyeballs can grow teeth and bite you. CGI can do anything. You're not necessarily going to believe it, but you might enjoy watching it. But so I don't know. The true horror, I think, is in creeping dread, and hopefully an adequate resolution for the central character. And there have been some good examples of that recently.
It's really interesting because I think like with some more like recent stuff like Skinamarink, and there's another one called Outwaters that's pretty interesting, where it's very much that creeping dread. It's very much that like things you can hear but can't see, things are kind of just in your, that allows you to kind of make it up in your head, which I think is the horror of the mind is some of the most scariest things, because we can imagine some of the most horrible things that you could ever dream up to actually put on screen.
I've never been a fan of home invasion movies because, frankly, that confronts me too much. That's too much like something I really don't want to imagine in my life. So, but there are some people who are riveted by them. So, my horror films are always of the fantastical nature. I mean, it's funny. Would you believe that the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad was initially seen by the British Board of Film Censors as a horror movie? And they said, well, this is too scary for the under-16s of Great Britain in 1957. You Americans, really. So we will give this an X certificate, and it can be seen by the over 16s. And they were, well, that's not what we want. So we'll make cuts. So they then made cuts, and it got an A certificate. Taking out a whole lot of dragon gnashing and a lot of stuff, but nothing that you'd consider graphic by today's standards. And then they wanted to re-release it a few years later and put it up with a general audience film, The Three Worlds of Gulliver, a U certificate film, meant that everybody could be admitted. An A certificate meant you had to bring a parental guardian if you were under 12. So that was a financial restriction in the release. So you always wanted as many things to get a U certificate in England in the 50s and 60s as possible. So they cut it even further to get a U certificate. So that was the first version of the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad that I saw, and I finally caught up with the full version many years later when I got interested in Ray Harryhausen. But anyway, a digression into censorship, partly because I'm writing a book on censorship, on movies. Oh, wow. I mutter things to myself. By the way, shameless plug, get out the way. This is the hardcover of my Adventures in the B-Movie Trade. It's a portrait of an era now gone. Anyway, many interesting illustrations, 200 in color, and a number of interesting stories, including stories about Leprechaun 3 and 4. So we had a good time. Sometimes movies are made by casts and crew who have a good time. It's often said that if the cast and crew, if everyone's having too good a time, and the movie's not going to be good. But I don't think good movies have to be created in an atmosphere of angst and stress. But I mean, obviously the process is by its nature a little stressful. But if you can be a team leader and project an atmosphere of cheerful confidence and a humorous response to sudden difficulties, then that will generally power things along. And if everyone is enjoying their work, the work will be good.
Absolutely. So one of the scenes that I definitely want to talk about, and I know is like a fan favorite, is the scene with Loretta, played by Caroline Williams, and probably know the scene, but the wonderful scene where she kind of has makes a wish to be more enhanced, I guess, shall we say, and gets blown up. Everything gets sort of proportionized and then explodes. I again, still one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema. So I'd love to hear about like filming that scene, like how effects wise, how like long of a process that took.
Well, I mean, one of your favorite scenes in cinema is, of course, a quintessential misogynistic scene in which
Yeah.
a woman's attitude to beauty and the way, you know, women are sold what is or is not beautiful is therefore satirized, and you know, there's a slightly uncomfortable quality to watching the scene now, though I was well aware of it, and I thought, let's, you know, it's a misogynistic scene, but let's make it so funny that you don't that you recognize it on both levels, and so the Botox lips and so forth, you know, the pressure for women to constantly be beautiful so they can attract a man. There's a horrible byproduct of the patriarchal society, and so you know, it was, we designed the levels of her, let's say, enhancement to mirror certain you know, market forces, let's say. So the boobs, you know, we had expanding balloons that could inflate so that you would see them getting bigger under her costume, and the costume was adjusted accordingly. And you know, the lips were special, you know, prosthetic devices that you know, with different sizes, so we could make it appear that they grew, but the boobs, you know, could be inflated. And then we added, you know, fat suit aspects to her, and it caused her to walk and get wedged in a door, and then and we had a special doorway frame made and tailored her fat suit to accommodate that, and then we had a life-size dummy built in that we could then wedge in that door and fill with the necessary materials. I didn't want to necessarily have blood and guts flying all over the screen. Again, it's taking the it's just making the joke less in your face, less visceral, less therefore uncomfortable to laugh at. I mean, if the man slips on the banana skin in the silent movie and falls back on his head and blood spurts from his head, that's not funny. But okay, large lady explodes. Well, chunks, grayish chunks and bits of the costume can fly through the air, but I didn't think blood and guts would be a good thing. So styrofoam. So, and then you pay it off with she was a lovely lass, but I had to blow up her ass, and so forth. But so that's how we approached it, and it's all a matter of careful consultation with the prosthetics department. They say, "What do you want to see?" And I say, "Well, I'd like to see, you know, how much of an enlargement of lips can you give me? How much, you know, of enlarge, you know, and so on and so forth." And you find out what you can do and how, in fact, if you shoot it from a particular angle, you light it this way, it will be more effective. So you work all these things out, test them in advance, and then schedule how you, in what order you shoot the makeup. It is sometimes easier to start the day with the hardest makeup first, and that can be prepared ahead of crew call, because sometimes it's a 3-hour, you know, makeup job. as it was with Warwick. Warwick was 2 hours 45 minutes generally from sitting in the chair to being able to walk to the set, and you have to factor that into the planning. And then there are other people with different prosthetic makeup requirements in the film, and that has to be scheduled as well. So sometimes it's easier to start the day with a difficult piece of makeup that can be perfected before the crew starts, shoot that scene, rip it off, and then go back to the beginning where the face is clean and performance takes place, up to the point where transformations begin to be need to be seen. And then you start building the smaller effects, which take less time to prepare, less waste of crew hanging around. So just a little, that's how I approach it, if that's of any use to you.
Now that was quite a load to have to explode. What a lovely lass. I had to blow up your ass, but now I must hit the road.
Yeah, it definitely is one of those scenes that it definitely hits different now that I'm an adult and I'm looking at it from sort of a different lens, a little bit more of a mature lens, sometimes more mature, sometimes not. But yeah, I think that it's played perfectly well because you know, now that I'm older, I get that this is more of a commentary on how shitty this is. It's not necessarily like a tacit endorsement of it.
Yes, that is true. It could be mistaken for documentary, but really there's an undercurrent of satire in all the bad behavior I enjoy putting on the screen.
Now speaking of cast, again, Warwick Davis, great. John Gatton, he seemed like really great in the role. What was he like to direct?
Well, he was an eager young actor wanting to do the best he could and trying very hard, as they all do. I've always enjoyed working with the young unknowns at the time, and some of them went on to better careers. And he actually went on to a good screenwriting career. And he, was Academy nominated for the screenplay for Flight, and has written other things since, and is no doubt a go-to film doctor screenwriter. Fix this, and yeah, that's so. He did well. He really studied his craft, and then he put his actor's intuition about character onto the page rather than onto the screen, and I commend him for that. I'm so pleased when one of my alumni from my sort of questionable children, let's say, when they go on to better things, so I'm pleased. So and a lot of there's a lot of talent in Leprechaun in Vegas and in Leprechaun in space. But I want to single out two supporting actors who would get regular work on television. Tom Dugan and Tony Hewlett, and they didn't need to do a bit in Leprechaun 3 for low budget scale, but they were a friend of the casting director, and the casting director had cast my previous movie and liked me and talked, and said, "You want to work with this director?" And so we had two basically, few line parts, for basically a day's shooting for two goons who were there to encourage the casino owner to pay his debts to the mob. And he was kind of being a bit tardy about it, and they was going to give him a reminder, and that's when they, unfortunately crossed paths with the Leprechaun. So Ted Gabriel, the casting director, said, "I got these two guys. Can I just send them along?" And so, sure. And so we shot with them, and I found them to be really good improvisational actors. Tom even threw in a line when the Leprechaun was about to kill him. "Tell me, what was Judy Garland really like?" And because Warwick's immediate improv fireback was, "She was a bitch," and I in the end did not use that line, because I thought, Liza Minnelli is around. This is not 1995, and it's a slap against her mother, and it's a Hollywood in joke. I don't know. Is it worth it? Occasionally, I have attacks of conscience, you see, and I didn't use it. But Tom showed he had improv ability. So I had 15 minutes to spare before they had to be rostered off. They'd done their 8-hour day. I said, let's whip up a quick scene where the two goons are just talking about anything other than the plot. And come up with something that might amuse us. And I gave them 10 minutes warning. And then the scene that you see where they talk about, what kind of briefs they wear. Anyway, is what emerged. And it just seemed to be a sly piece of humor that just, to me, helped the tone of the whole film. And that I was, I thought there was a college audience for this as well as a pubescent audience for it. So anyway, I just wanted to single these two guys out for, and it was great that I was able to bring them up onto the stage at the Cine Family when they ran Leprechaun 3 in Vegas one night, 12 years ago, I think. And there was a Q&A afterwards, and I was able to get them up on the stage, and they talked about it. It's on YouTube. Anyway, so there you go.
Did they talk about if their views on boxer briefs had changed since making Leprechaun 3?
No, I don't think they did actually. That was actually something that really should have been discussed in depth.
Yeah,
I'd like to know how you guys. Never mind. Yeah, but it's I love actors, and I've always had a good time with actors, and I just like to single a few people out for special praise who are rarely noticed.
Yeah, they're great. And again, it's funny because it's such a fun scene, and it feels so natural that it doesn't feel improv. It feels like this was rehearsed and written.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I was kind of just skimming the IMDb trivia, which is sometimes reliable, sometimes not. So one of the pieces of trivia is you only shot one night in Las Vegas, and a lot of the scenes on the Strip were done without permits. Is that right?
Correct. Yes. We'd applied to shoot at the Golden Nugget, and they'd said, absolutely not. We don't want to be, mocked by a Leprechaun movie. Well, I assume that was their motivation. So I thought, well, to hell with that. We'll just shoot a scene right outside the Golden Nugget. I'll do it on the 14mm lens, and I'll thereby, put it on the pavement and have the Leprechaun with the lens appear to be towering over the golden nugget, and he would say, golden nugget, I'd like one of those. Anyway, so thank you, golden nugget. And we finished shooting the fire stunt at 2 a.m, where the leprechaun is on fire and on a wire and twirling around. We got a few hours sleep, and we caught a plane to Vegas at 3. And Warwick had gone ahead because he hadn't been in that scene. It was his double being burned. And he had gone through the 3 hours of makeup. So we then rendezvoused at a designated spot. We put him in a nice hotel, and then he taxied down to a Vietnamese restaurant in the pawnbroker district, which we had chosen as our basic base of operations. And we had a little cart that we could put the camera and sound gear on. And our continuity girl was doubling one of the actors, the actress, actually. John Gatins was playing himself. And we could do shots of them crossing streets in costume, integrating Vegas in lots of places throughout the film. And then they go into interiors that were done in Las Vegas. That were done in Los Angeles. We had specific, things that we wanted to obviously get the leprechaun out there as much as possible in front of people. I must say, when we went to the Vietnamese restaurant, we hadn't made I think we made a booking for a group of 10, and so we all arrived except for Warwick and Gabe, and then they suddenly came through the door, and Warwick was in full costume as a leprechaun, and the waitstaff of the restaurant just froze at the sight of him. And he immediately reacted and went,
nice,
and then laughed. And we introduced them, and they thought it was hugely funny, and they were very honored to be the chosen production office of Leprechaun in Vegas. We ate well and paid them well, and came back and forth from time to time throughout the night until we left at about 5:30 and headed for the airport and caught a morning plane out. And our last shots were cruising past neon signs and things like that. We found that people wanted to be extras. People came up to us in the street. We were walking along, getting the next shot organized. Are you making a Leprechaun movie? Yes, we are. Can we be in it? Oh, certainly you can. Yes. Would you come over there? I'd like you to walk forward as the Leprechaun is here, and you don't notice him. Oh, okay. And stuff like that. Our difficulty was, of course, when the Leprechaun is trying to hitch a ride out of town, and he's in the median strip of this highway heading out of Vegas. And the joke is no one wants to pick him up. Everybody wanted to pick him up. Getting that shot was a little difficult, but we managed. But it was a wonderful night of guerrilla shooting. I did a certain amount in my early years, and it was interesting to return to it in 1994.
Now, the other little bit of trivia that I thought was interesting, and I wonder if you could confirm, which was the morgue scenes were actually shot in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, it was the morgue scenes. I felt, I didn't realize this. Interesting coincidence, in my life. I landed in San Francisco the morning after Robert Kennedy had been shot at the Ambassador Hotel. I was just boarding the plane, leaving Hawaii, when the news was coming through, and I couldn't understand what all the fuss was about. And of course, no television on the plane. And then I learned as soon as I got to San Francisco that this great tragedy had occurred, and a tragedy that, if it hadn't occurred, might have made a profound difference to the history of the last 50 years. But so longer. But anyway, so there was the mood of America on that morning was quite something that I will never forget. Actually, I took myself to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly at the next session I could find as sort of therapy. Anyway, many years later, I find myself at the Ambassador Hotel, and the only place to do a morgue, which we had quite a few scenes in a morgue, were the kitchen area. Was the kitchen area, and that was where initially Robert Kennedy's body was taken and laid on the floor by the elevator before being taken down to the ambulance, and there was an X carved onto the tile where his head lay, and that was still there in 1995. And I felt, are we being disrespectful to a great man's memory by shooting this movie here? I mean, there are 3 movies shooting in this hotel at the moment. Martin Sheen is doing a Prohibition era gangster movie. Tia Carrera is doing some modern day gambling thriller, and I'm doing Leprechaun in Vegas, and we're roaming all over the building and using whatever it offers as a location. Should I, on moral grounds, say I don't want to defile this sacred site, or should I say, well, I'm here, I got a job to do. How do I make the best out of it? And how do I honor the memory, if you want to look at it that way? I don't know. I'm sure opinion is sharply divided on that. But I'm a practical man, and I'm very sorry that Robert Kennedy did not contribute what I think he would have done to American politics. I'm sure there are people who disagree with that too, but I'm quite convinced of that. Anyway, with this, let us return to cinema fantasies.
Not to bring the mood down, but I just thought that was kind of interesting.
I think look, if you're going to talk about this movie, if this movie is worth talking about at all, these are questions and issues that are of interest, because filmmaking, I think more and more we're seeing an ethical and cultural sensitivity entering the whole arena of filmmaking now. We're now more conscious of not doing things that seem to be inadvertently culturally demeaning. We try to take care to do that. Not always successful, but I think there is a mood amongst filmmakers all over the world to say, let's try and get rid of the stereotypes, or if we use stereotypes, let's point to them and show what they are.
It's very interesting, again, how sort of sensibilities are always growing, evolving. I mean, that must be interesting as a filmmaker too, because you're certainly not going to be making the same type of movie that you made in the 70s versus 80s versus 90s. It's always evolving.
No, exactly. I would love to make a movie that was, these days, that was positive and reinforced, let's say, social unity and international unity, for that matter. But and these films are indeed being made. So, would I make another horror movie? Would I make another Leprechaun movie? I wasn't asked the last couple of times. Say, I was a little too out there for them, I think. But I would make another Leprechaun movie if it was funny and if it had social criticism. I mean, I came up with the idea of Leprechaun in the White House. After Leprechaun in Space was made and delivered, and everyone thought, oh, well, Lep 3 did huge business on the home video market, highest selling independently distributed direct to video of 1995, 55,000 copies shipped, I believe. I got a report of such. So Lep Space should do at least as well. It didn't. It did 40,000 instead. But at the time of delivery, I had proposed, well, the next one should be Leprechaun in the White House. We could have, the Independence Day spaceship arriving over the White House and firing down into a block of ice onto the roof and disappearing, and the ice melts, and the leprechaun that they have obviously captured found in space at the end of Leprechaun in Space, they obviously don't want this, and they dump it on the Earth. It thaws out and gets into the crawl space of the White House, and then there's all sorts of political satire of the Clinton era, which was, I think, equally equal opportunity offender to both political parties, let's say, and would have had a climax of the Leprechaun trying to steal Fort Knox. Required two major sets, a White House set and a Fort Knox set. And there are many White House sets that are just in storage, and you can pull them out. And I've used one. I used it in DC 9/11 Time of Crisis. So there's one in Toronto. And there's probably one in several cities now. Anyway, so that was my plan. But then Lep and Space, they didn't seem to do the sales they thought. But then a few years later, the Monica Lewinsky affair broke, and I thought that I rang Trimark and said, wouldn't you like to have had 1,200 prints ready for this release just this weekend?
No, I mean, I feel like you could still make that. I mean, I feel like there's I mean,
Leprechaun in the Trump White House would be an amazing movie.
Yeah,
someone should commission me to make it immediately.
Yes. Listen, I would drain my bank account to help crowdfund that, because that sounds amazing.
Or even just like a West Wing treatment with Leprechaun
joining. It has to be done properly. It has to be done properly with good actors. Anyway, carry on.
So pivoting to, of course, Leprechaun in Space. Now, like you said, the VHS of Leprechaun 3 did extremely well. So of course they were like, we want you to make another one. Now, was there always kind of the idea to have that be the setting, or like was that something kicking around prior to?
Well, as I understand it, initially at a Christmas party at Trimark, they had a poster that they'd made in honor of their success with the Leprechaun, franchise, where they took the Apollo, 9 poster and put a leprechaun coming out of the capsule, and Houston, we have a problem, Apollo 13, and so the Apollo 13 joke was just initially at their Christmas party, and then you thought, well, maybe that's not a bad idea. And they came to me, to the same producers, and said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, rather than the Apollo mission and, obviously Cape Canaveral, the Cape Kennedy, Space Mission Control sets, etc. Why don't you go more in the direction of aliens and have a platoon of space marines hunting an alien creature? And it turns out to be a leprechaun with a lightsaber in his shillelagh. And they thought, okay. And you can see I was veering much more towards comedy. And so away we went. And Dennis and I, came up with various set pieces that we felt could be done on the budget. And they increased the budget from Leprechaun 3 to $1.6 million. It's still, the film, I think, still, the film is let down by poor visual effects. We took on a new company that didn't actually, couldn't deliver, I thought, the quality level that could be done for the money. But yeah, that's just. But when you see, other things that were being done at the same time with similar equipment. So now, of course, visual effects, CGI is remarkable and getting cheaper all the time. Anyway, but that said, the film, I think, delivers for that sort of split market that pubescent boys and sci-fi geeks of all ages, because the references to various sci-fi movies, from blowing up the mitten spider, and he says like the fly, just before, the various little things like that that might give a smile to. The whole film is an homage to those kind of completely wacky, frequently 50s as well as 60s sci-fi films. The 50s had some really wacky plots. And so it's an homage to those kind of sci-fi, mad scientist creature features. Let's see how far we can go.
I mean, it's funny because, like, again, this is the difference of watching it, way back when and watching it now. I'm like, oh, like I totally get those references. And I'm even kind of like, oh, this kind of has a little bit of a Doctor Who vibe, a little bit of Red Dwarf thrown in. And again, the great homages, the nice inside jokes, again, like you were saying about Warwick with a lightsaber, and of course he was in some of the Star Wars films. So now I'm kind of curious. I'd love to hear about working with Jessica Collins. She, of course, that was her feature film debut. Is that right?
I believe so. I think she went on to a pretty solid career as a television actress after that. I think she continued acting and maybe is still acting.
Mm-hmm. Now, like, I know you were talking about earlier about hiring these like young actors that are like, again, enthusiastic, hungry for the work. Was that kind of the case with Jessica?
I think she was, certainly very focused on her career.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think she quite got my sense of humor, but I think she did some things extremely well. No, she was a solid professional, but some people get me and get in on the joke and then want to add to the joke, and some people don't, and that's fine. And I tend to persist with the people who do. Now,
with Warwick, was the makeup process relatively similar? Was it like streamlined any from 3 to 4?
I think Gabe, being a very talented effects artist, he no doubt looked at ways of trying to get the makeup time down, but it tended to be 2 hours 45 minutes to get it on and 40 minutes to get it off, and you have an 8-hour day plus an agreed amount of overtime, but not more than a 10-hour day overall. So look at the chunk of that day that you have lost to that makeup time, and how do you best utilize those hours of photography? And that's, it's a challenge I find interesting. So
now I'm assuming Warwick was probably a trooper going through all that makeup process.
Absolutely. I mean, he didn't like it. Who'd like it? and the smell of the chemicals is it's something you have to put up with. And Guy Siner, an old school friend of mine who became a TV star in England on a BBC comedy show about French resistance fighters in World War II. Allo, allo. And I think it played on PBS here for many, many years and ran for 9 years. Anyway, he graciously said, "Okay, I'm in LA. I'll be very happy to play Dr. Mitten Spider, or Dr. Mitten Hand, who then becomes Dr. Mitten Spider, and did a sterling job. And he went through 6 hours of makeup to become Mitten Spider, and yeah, it gave him a bad chemical reaction on his biggest day, but he was fine. But he was a real pro. Actors who work in these kind of movies, once they work in prosthetic makeup movies, heavy duty costume movies, well, they get used to it, or they just don't do them.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that would be like. I don't see that in my cards anytime soon, but I appreciate people that can trooper through that.
So 3 and 4 were, I think, optioned for release on video. Was there any, like, other than the Leprechaun Goes to the White House, perhaps a revival idea that you think could bring Leprechaun back to the theater?
So going out, driving, parking, babysitter, concession, outrageous prices, all these negative factors to the cinema going experience are impacting, unfortunately. And when there's a movie everyone really wants to see, be it if it's high budget, Avatar in 3D, very impressive, or low budget, and Megan, very smartly scripted and neatly done, and people thought, yeah, for kids, that's a good night out. So there are films that are hitting the mark, but the bulk of stuff has to have something really fresh about it. And, Leprechaun has been, it's yesterday's old rice, and it's been sort of picked over a bit. So you'd have to come up with something really radical, and possibly, Leprechaun in the Trump White House would be really radical. But it's more of that should be a Saturday Night Live continuing series. I think that would be more the best way to do that kind of material. But the idea of getting people to come to the theaters to see an absurdist movie that has been made 7 times before might be drawing a long bow, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I think if we had an interesting ensemble behind it, you had mentioned Megan. Keela Cooper has been doing a lot of good work on screenwriting. I could actually see her working towards a Leprechaun story, and Blumhouse is about to unveil some secret trilogy project. You never know. Like there might be some options out there, and like.
Well, I don't know, but Hollywood regard me as past my use-by date. So
I don't think so.
They're going to be coming to me, unfortunately, capable though I am. I have, So there are a lot of really talented young people that are, possibly more logical choices. I have been.
Oh.
This is Tuxedo. Just wants to say,
oh, very cute.
She watches movies,
Nice.
Both the cats watch movies with us, and in fact, she, the other, come on, don't dig your claws in. There we go. Thank you. Okay, I'll scratch your belly, and now you're happy. There are new things suddenly turning up in the theaters that put a new twist on old material, and if they can do that with Leprechaun, if they could do it with Night of the Demons too, and who knows? It's possible, but it's all in the writing. Show me a really funny script, or a really clever script, or a script that. So the key is to make sure that the audience isn't ahead of the writer.
Yeah.
Writer's got to be ahead of the audience, and the audience has got to be satisfied by the way the tale is told, getting just enough information to satisfy questions but intrigue you to want to know more. And this is being satisfied much more by the streaming services at the moment. A very good example of it is this totally, riveting, character-driven piece on HBO, The White Lotus, and similarly, The Last of Us, and on Disney, Andor, and so on. The list is very long, and I've got a whole lot of favorite historical dramas that have popped up all over from European countries and Asian countries, and they're all really good and interesting, and
I also just want to pitch a Leprechaun White Lotus style situation. I think that would be amazing. Aw.
Anyway, yes. Okay. A Leprechaun White Lotus situation, right?
Yeah, I think like a mashup of Leprechaun at a posh resort, I think could be a lot of fun. I think that could be rife with satire.
Well, certainly, yeah. I mean, it would a Leprechaun being one of the guests at the menu, for instance.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a little Glass Onion, Knives Out energy with like a
yes
murder mystery aspect. Yeah.
All right. I love it. Let's write
it.
Well, Warwick himself always wanted to do a series of books about a little person private detective. I forget the name of it.
Okay.
Yes, and he did pitch it to Trimark, but they didn't bite.
I bet that would sell now, though. With
I would think so. Yeah.
That's serious for sure.
And there are a lot of up and coming, talented little person actors. I'm sure I'm being politically incorrect in the way I'm stumbling through my, my encouraging sentiments. But
I feel like representation is getting a lot better. I feel like we have a little bit of ways to go, but yeah, we're definitely on the right track. I think that anybody that hasn't checked your book out really needs to do that. It's amazing.
I have my copy. There it is.
Excellent. Matching copies. Yeah,
well, it's the soft cover, black and white, but it still has all the writing and the visual accoutrements.
The hardcover is for serious geeks, and the soft cover is for student geeks. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. I hope. Thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian.
Okay. Bye for now.